Hi, friends, and welcome to another episode of Yourbishtherapist podcast. Today, I am so happy to have my dear friend Lyndsay Lime back. Hi, Lyndsay.
Hello. I'm so happy to be back. Our number one supporters of the Surreal Life crew over here.
Yes, we are carrying it on our backs. We should be getting a production credit.
Literally, we should be getting some ad money for, promoting them. That's all I gotta say.
For real. Because no one, people were like, oh, I enjoy listening to your recaps, but I can't watch it. They can't find it anywhere.
They can't find it anywhere, or I hear a lot of people saying, oh yeah, I keep hearing about it. I'm going to watch it, but I haven't yet.
Right.
So
right.
I don't know.
Well, so for those of you who are like everybody else and just either not watching it, you just don't have time, you can't find it, whatever it is. Today, Lyndsay and I are going to do more of as promised, a deeper dive into some of the storylines that, we didn't get to talk about last time because, Lyndsay, you and I, when we get going, it's just, da-da-da-da-da.
Yes.
But like we said, we just talked before we started recording, and it's so interesting because the last episode in particular was so intense. And there was like a lot of information I felt, psychologically speaking. So today what Lyndsay and I are going to do is we're going to talk about each person and talk about, kind of the most interesting parts of their story. We're going to talk a little bit about, anxiety and mental health issues. So let's get into it.
Let's do it.
So I should give a recap for people maybe who didn't listen to our previous episode so the Surreal Life Villa of Secrets, these are, the show has been on for a long time, a kind of like hit or miss, back and forth. And what's so interesting, especially about Josie Canseco, is her dad, Jose, was on the Surreal Life. And the last episode, it shared a very dark image and reminder of, what he had talked about. So we'll talk about that in just a moment. But so it's 2 weeks in Medellin, Colombia. And they live in this wild house. Like, it's just so interesting looking. I don't even know if I think it's pretty. It's like all pink and I don't know.
Very colorful. A little too much. A little over sensory.
Yeah. Speaking of sensory overload, I think I would have some sensory issues in that house.
For sure.
So what they do is they do group challenges, and then they have like provocative missions, and they have a virtual host. Her name is Sloan, and she is the Surreal Life operator and navigator. I thought, that's also an interesting twist to it. And then the synopsis is each day the celebrity guests are surprised with provocative missions that push their limits, uncover their pasts, and lead them to divulge their deepest truths. And so, Lyndsay, what's so interesting is last time you and I talked about it, I said that I felt like this group of people, it seemed like there was stuff going on behind the scenes to make them like trauma bond really quick. And I feel like we saw that in this last episode. These people are having all these deep conversations. But I'm like, it's only been 2 weeks.
I know. I don't know if it's because it's only 2 weeks, so they want to make a good show. They kind of have that in their mind. But also, when you watch the show, there's not a lot of crazy drama. It's silly drama, but really the core, like the heart of the show, is for them to have these deep conversations. Is for them to connect in these ways. And I remember watching the last episode, being like, oh my gosh, I feel like they're all like really love each other.
I know.
That was surprising.
Yeah. It was surprising because you would think that there would have been more drama, but they really did seem to bond and like really love each other. So yeah, it was really interesting to watch. But so what Lyndsay and I are going to do, we're going to go through each cast member and talk a little bit about our, interesting things that we found about their storyline and stuff like that. So let's start with Chet Hanks, because We both last time sang his praises, and we both continue to be blown away by how this man is an earth angel.
We did, and we forgot there's actually so much more to his story that we forgot to talk about. And he is just talk about someone who, I mean, his dad is Tom Hanks. So
Yep.
the pressure that has and just his life. I think he actually posted on Instagram yesterday. He is now 3 years sober. So
Yes.
congratulations.
Yay.
That's amazing.
Congratulations.
But he's someone who his story is just, it's really sad, but it's nice to see like where he is in life right now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he has a story.
You're absolutely right. He has such a story that and there's multiple layers to it. So the first thing I think that's so interesting about Chet Hanks is that, I mean, aside from, yes, being in his father's shadow, and they did yearbooks at the end, and his superlative in high school was most likely to live with her parents until the age of 40.
Yes.
And it was like, while it was funny, it was also, you could see the hurt in his eyes, just like he constantly feels the need to prove himself, because like when your dad is Tom Hanks, arguably the most beloved human probably in the world, just such a wonderful human, so successful. You know, your kids, it's like they're going to have issues trying to not compete, but like that's a large shadow to cast, right? And so we get the sense that he feels that a lot.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Do you want to get into it while we talk to him about the finale, or do you want that to be its own, like, separate thing?
No,
him?
yeah.
Okay.
Good question. We can absolutely get into that.
Well, because his whole thing, I wrote it down because, you know, and I'll say trigger warning for this because the last episode, they do talk about suicidal ideation. And actually, I mean, I would almost say attempt, maybe, like, you know what I mean? Or the thinking of, you know, he basically, Chet talked about how he had a gun in his mouth or near his head. And I wrote down what he said because it's exactly what you were saying, Melissa, is he said, and this was 4 months prior to the Surreal Life, is the kind of headspace he was in.
4 months prior, huge point. Huge point. This is 4 months prior. Yes, go ahead.
And he said, felt like it was all on him to make something of himself. Harder I tried, the farther I would get. And that just, I don't know, like, I think all of us can resonate with that a little bit. And then for it to get to that place where he felt that way, and then he didn't do it because he was like, I can't leave my daughter.
Right.
And
because of
those were those protective factors, you know, really come in. But it's so sad to think about just 4 months before this filming, he was in that place. And so that he didn't talk about this. I really wish in these moments, I do wish they would break the fourth wall and ask him like, hey, after this happened, did you seek counseling? Did you know what I mean? I kind of wish they would go to that, because like no one should live alone with those thoughts and for that to happen. And I'm not saying everyone has to go do that, but you know what I mean? Just hearing that, like you're at that such a low place. It was heartbreaking to hear.
Completely agree. And I was grateful. So after he shared about this episode of suicidal ideation, and to your point, it was more than just ideation because he was holding a gun to his head. And, oh God, I tear up just thinking about it. Cause it just, you know, I've had the honor of walking through that with a lot of people in my practice. And it's so sad to see someone who's such a beautiful human, just like our brains lie to us, depression, it lies to us, or anxiety, it lies to us. And so to see him talk about this, and you mentioned something super important, which is protective factors. And, you know, without his daughter, you know, who knows what really would have happened. But I do agree that I wish, aside from, you know, there was a slide after this was discussed it talked about, like, if you're having thoughts of harming yourself, mental health is health.us. And so it did list those. But I agree, Lyndsay, I would have wanted to hear for him, like, can you tell people, like, you know, what helped you get get here? What helped you get to this point? What helped you take it one day at a time? I assume that, because he is in sobriety and full recovery, which means he's actively working a program.
Yeah.
And so people who do that, there is a lot of room for self-reflection and things like that. And I think what I also loved about how he shared that is that it just goes to show that being in sobriety doesn't solve the problems, right? Sometimes for a lot of folks getting into sobriety, actually, you stop self-medicating, and then the mental health issues or anxiety or whatever it is that you've been numbing comes up, and it's like, oh my gosh, I have to deal with this. And a lot of folks who use substances, right? It's like an avoidance of dealing with it. So I just wanted to normalize that piece of it too. And I think it was so interesting because it cut to Josie talking about how her dad had a eerily similar story. Oh, I have goosebumps just as I said that. And so what happened was they show, I guess it was a flashback to, I'm not sure what episode it was of the Surreal Life, but it was when Jose Canseco was on the Surreal Life. Do you know how many years ago that was?
I don't, but if you notice in the clip, that was when Janice Dickinson was also in that season. I remember that season very well. I remember watching it, but gosh, that had to have been, I think Surreal Life started in the early 2000s. So we're talking maybe almost 20 something years ago, potentially.
Ew, stop it, Lyndsay. I have not aged a day, so that is impossible. Impossible. So it was so sad because it cuts to basically Jose Canseco telling Janice Dickinson and all the folks sitting around the table at the Surreal Life house about how he had a gun to his head and then he heard his daughter cry. And it saved his, oh my God, I know, I'm getting teary. Oh, stop it, Melissa. So, and what I think is so interesting about this is that Josie is now in the house, right? And to me, nothing happens by coincidence. This is more than just coincidence that, he's telling the story in that Surreal Life house about his daughter saved his life. And now she's at the Surreal Life house and she's hearing Chet's story. And it just felt like a interesting full circle moment.
It really did. And when Jose, when you saw on the clip, he said he literally, in the same scenario, had the gun and then he heard his daughter crying. And then when he picked up his daughter, he felt like her heartbeat on her chest. And it just shows you how it makes me want to tear up because as someone like I've been there before, feeling that way, and your mind it feels so far gone, but then there's like something that like just clicks or happens, and like they're able to still be here today, whereas that's not always, the case. And just for someone to feel like truly that's the lowest of the low that one can feel, and just them having almost this like exact experience was so, but then it's like, after that, again, you, for yourself, like, yes, you want to be there for your daughter, but then I hope, as time goes on, they figure out, I don't know, I feel like Chet has to learn to like himself almost.
You're right. Because the unfortunate thing is that nobody else can save us. We have to live for us. We have to get sober for us. We have to get mentally well for us. And, Lyndsay, I'm super grateful for you to share that. And, I've shared that I've been in the same situation too. And like, I literally understand what it is for your brain to lie to you. Like, oh yeah, you literally believe in the moment, like, this is no. And then, so I'm grateful for you for sharing your story. And I'm grateful for this platform because I know there are people listening to this that have felt those same feelings and are feeling them right now. And so for those listening to us, hear our voices when we tell you your brain is lying to you. You're a beautiful person. Whatever is going on in life, there's a solution to every problem. There is help available. If you need it, reach out to me, DM me. I'm happy to steer people in the right direction for help and things like that. But I just want to reiterate, mental health is health.us. Also, the suicide crisis text line is 988. And that is the best line for mental health emergencies because more people who are qualified are answering phone calls and responding and things like that. So, you know, I know this is really heavy early in the episode, but this is what we're here to do, right? Because this is the important stuff that, like, yeah, it's just a silly show. But at the end of the day, when you're looking at it, it's like, these are humans. These are their real lives. And, you know, I'm so grateful Chet is here. I'm grateful everyone listening to this is here. I mean, just, it's hard.
It is hard. And I think, again, even it's, you know, I think when people think of the Surreal Life, they're always like, oh, okay, this is just a show with a bunch of like C-list celebrities or things like that. But it's like, these are real people. They have had careers. They have had, you know, even if they have a famous parent, that is a part of their story. And I don't know, I wasn't expecting to come out of this show such like a Chet Hanks lover, because I really didn't know. When you look at him, like, I'm sorry, but like, he looks like a bro. He looks like a douchebag.
He does.
Like, he
yes,
does.
For
but
sure.
like, that's not him at all. And it just, you know, I'm thankful that we got to see so much of his story. And what I appreciate about the episode is, yeah, at the beginning of the episode, they had a trigger warning. And then right after that scene, they had the resources, which I thought that was nice because Bravo particular, well, usually doesn't have a trigger warning. But
Bravo does nothing.
No.
Nothing.
And sometimes they'll put stuff at the end of the episode. But to me, you could have already turned your TV off by then. You know what I mean?
Correct.
Once they start playing on next week, I sometimes turn my TV off. So I liked that they had it right after the conversation. I was like, okay, that's a good note. Like, take note, Bravo.
Oh, yeah. Take note. Oh my God. I've been screaming and I'll continue to scream at Bravo until somebody hears me. It's not hard. It's one slide. And listen, I understand people can Google stuff or whatever country you live in, whatever. Is Google like worldwide? Is Google like Candy Burris? And is it worldwide?
That's such a good question. Are there people out there that can't just Google?
Well,
I don't know.
And I ask that because I have listeners from all over the world. Yeah. And so hit me back, listeners in other countries. Do you have Google, or is it Google in your language? Is it just, I don't know. I'm curious about that. And the point is, I say that in jest, but I understand people can look up resources. But when you are struggling and when you're in the weeds, it's just helpful to have someone say, you're not alone. Here's some information. Like, that's just comforting. So, but the other interesting things about Chet Hanks that I definitely wanted to mention before we moved on is he was sent to one of those teenage hell camps and taken and abducted in the middle of the night, a la Paris Hilton. In fact, it was the same place that Paris Hilton went to. It was the same place.
It was the same place, right?
Yep. And for those listening, I have, I think season 2 was like episode 1 and 2. I talked about Paris Hilton because I have her book. And honestly, it was a good read. So I talked about her experience in those hell camps. And then there was like on Netflix, it was called Teenage Hell Camp. And so I covered that as well because nothing lights my soul on fire like adults harming children. You will light my soul on fire. I will become an unstoppable force because it's just disgusting. And so what I can say about that is that, you know, same with Paris Hilton's family is that they were victims too, right? Yeah. They were being told, this is what's best for your child. Psychology, research studies show, blah, 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 blah. And Chet talked about how his parents since apologized and they just didn't know. And I think same thing for, you know, Paris Hilton's parents. I mean, Paris was trying to tell them, so that was a little bit of a different situation. But at the end of the day, my point is everyone in this is a victim, the families included, because no one who loved their child would ever subject them to that torture. So I just feel that has such a psychological impact when you're in your formative years, you're taken in the night, and he just talked about, you know, I would call my parents and beg them, please, I'll be good. Oh my God. I also cried at that. That just broke my heart. And then here you have his parents who just think that they're doing the best thing because they're scared and they don't want to lose their son. So
it's so, I know. I remember him. Yeah, I think he said he called them and he would write to his parents saying how, please, I'll be good. Like, let me come home. Meanwhile, his parents were told that he's lying. That's what they all say. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I think when you're in that situation, I like to think his parents were coming from, they thought that they were getting him help and they thought maybe this is the last option. They've tried all the things. But this type of hellhole that what they do to these kids is never okay and should not be a thing ever. And it's heartbreaking that they look at like these, what they call quote unquote bad kids, and they put these in the, you know what I mean, in the situation. I mean, Paris has talked what all happened when she was there. I don't think Chet really talked a lot about what happened while he was there. I would be interested to know. But yeah, just it makes my skin crawl. And as someone who, you know, when I was in the field and I worked with kiddos, you just like your job for, you know, let's say this was like a mental health facility, but it's freaking not. But like your job there is to protect these kiddos. And you can't say that you're doing that. You're literally torturing them. Can you imagine as like therapists, like you had a job and they're like, okay, so go kidnap your kid, this kid, and bring him here. No way in hell.
It's so fascinating because when I talked about this on those episodes is that in the 80s and 90s, I feel there was a real like surge of like teenagers are the problem. Yes. It's not the parents. It's not the family system. There's definitely no secret trauma going on behind the scenes that nobody knows about. It couldn't be that. Teenagers are just inherently awful humans. And I was one of the teenagers who was victim to that. And not these camps, but just the treatment and, the whole thing. And so I think that it's learning that teenagers are human beings that deserve love and support, and they're developmentally supposed to act up. Like developmentally, that's what kids do when they feel safe, or, just developmentally when they're trying to figure stuff out. Like, who am I in the shadow of my dad, Tom Hanks, and all that stuff? So I think society loves to pathologize behaviors, especially in teenagers, especially without understanding that it's really coming from a place of hurt. But the last thing I'll say, because we definitely want to move on from him, but the last fascinating thing, Lyndsay, is that he lived in a haunted house.
Oh, that's right.
Do you remember him talking about that?
Yes, I forgot about that. The lives he has lived.
He has lived, honey. I know. He has lived. He has been scared and tortured. And I feel bad, but apparently it was like this big house that they lived in as a family. And Tom and Rita, they would all talk about how this house was haunted. And I just found that so insanely wild.
No, I love a good haunted house story.
Well, here's the funny thing. So I lived in a haunted house too. And when I was 17, and I have stories that would blow people's mind. But maybe I'll make that another episode.
No, you should. So my husband, Corey, he lived in an apartment that so the apartment, it used to be, first it was a nursing home, and then it was a hotel. And just a quick haunted story. He was maybe in middle school. He was in the kitchen and his dad was in the living room, and Corey got up and a knife just flew across the room.
Stop that.
No, literally, Corey and his dad have both told this story, and he has other ghost stories. I was like, what the? And I've been in that apartment before, and you do feel like a darkness, but I never had any experience my own. But yeah, he's got some stories, crazy times.
Maybe hubby will have to come on, and we'll have to tell ghost stories.
Yes, Corey, come on in. That's so funny.
I think people would love to hear that. But okay, maybe we'll do that another time. So, and last thing about Chet is that he sings like a literal angel. He has such an amazing voice. I was like, wow, like the talent is real with this one.
I know. I hope he actually pursues music. I think that would be good for him.
So I think what we saw, if I'm not mistaken, in the last episode, there was a slide about like what they're doing now. And it said he's actually in Nashville recording.
Oh, yes, you're right.
Him.
It did say that. Yep. Yes.
I hope that helps him find his identity. Okay.
Me too.
Let's move on to Johnny Weir. I love me some Johnny Weir. He is, I wish I could just keep him in my little pocket. He's like a ray of sunshine, a bundle of joy. He is sass on a stick, but in the most intelligent and like spot on hilarious ways. Like you could tell he would just say things in his confessionals. Like when he talked about how Tyler was giving minions.
Yes. Him and Macy Grey, they were the comedic aspects of the show that we really needed. No, I really enjoyed him, and I really didn't know much about him going into this. So I walked away a fan for sure.
Oh, for sure. And like what I appreciated about Johnny's story is that, you know, he talked about, because he grew up gay in like a Midwest, area that like he got bullied, of course, and was like little and had braces, and, you know, being gay wasn't acceptable. Which, God, don't even get me started on that. Anyway, so he had this really difficult growing up in terms of just feeling like not that he didn't belong. And he talked about how people just think of him as like an Olympic ice skater and someone who has like wild fashions and someone who's like a bitch, but he is just like in reality a super good person. Like he's just like a good citizen in that, you know, he was the only one who like cleaned the house and kept his area neat and was, you know, willing to just do anything that they asked him to do. I don't know. I loved every bit of him.
No, I did too. And I really enjoyed, it was also heartbreaking, but just listening to him, and I think I said this in the last episode, but he talked a little bit about, you know, he felt at times he was being told he was quote unquote too gay or not gay enough. And him just talking about that, I feel like so many people can relate to that. And he just, he was funny in the show. I always loved his Kim impersonations.
Oh my God, the best.
He would always act like, because Kim was always on her phone. Kim would not have done Surreal Life if they weren't allowed their phones. That's all I got to say. Because that girl, always on her phone.
Unreal. I have glued to her phone, like in caps. But yeah. Yes. And thank you for breaking that up, because and that is exactly what I mean when it's like, when you feel you don't fit in anywhere, like you're too gay for people or you're not gay enough. And it's like, like what a crappy feeling. Yeah. And so I feel like what I heard him say was, it was just nice to feel like I fit in, like I belong. And what I really appreciated was, so at the end, OT made a joke about how, so OT, and we're going to talk about him in a minute, he's like from absolute violence, poverty, like grew up in very, very terrible circumstances, still lives in them from what I understand.
It sounds like it. I mean, we'll get into it, but he made a comment in the finale. I was like, wait, so does he still live in this type of situation?
Yeah. I was like, OT, have you not gotten yourself out of that? Oh God, how can I help you? But he did. So, you know, OT, my point is he has a very toxic masculinity model, right? Because in areas like that, you can't be vulnerable. You're not safe. If you're vulnerable, you die. And so what he made a joke about how, you know, I have never lived with a gay person. And he was like, Johnny, you're one of my favorite people. I am so grateful for this. You are my friend. And I was like, see, look at that. Love and growth and understanding. I love it.
I do too. That was super sweet to hear. And they all kind of laughed at that. But OT was like, no, I'm for real.
He's like, no, for real. And obviously he used much more colorful language that I'm not going to use.
Well, yes, that's what he does.
OT's language is wild, honey, and there's a lot of things that A, you can't say, and B, a white person has no business saying. So
Never.
But with Johnny Weir, two things I wanted to point out is that one, he was talking in the scene to Macy Grey about how he was like washing Kim's boobs.
Oh, yes. I forgot about that. Yes.
And then he was asking her, wait, who did Macy room with? He was like, he's not washing your breasts. And then Macy was like, no, the only one touching my breast is going to be Jason Momoa. It was so
Jason
funny.
Momoa. Oh, she said someone else too. I can't remember. But yeah, she's so
Javier
funny.
Bardem.
Yes.
That's her dream.
Wash her boobs.
Johnny's like doing the movements, and I'm like, oh dang, I really think he washed Kim's boobs.
He probably did.
And I'm like, okay, I know this is silly, but may I ask why they're not hard to access? Like, why? You're back.
Well, she was texting. Oh, because she was texting. She had no hands.
Oh my God, you're probably right.
She was on the phone.
You're probably right. Oh my God, Lyndsay. He seems like a very wise owl. He said something about when they were doing, he hates water. And they were doing a boat thing. And he has like a fear of water, makes him nervous, which again is so funny and ironic because like your whole life is on frozen water. But you can't drown in frozen water. So, it's different.
Right. That's
but I
true.
just found that very ironic. He talked about how he didn't really want to do it, but he did. And he said this phrase that I swear to you, it stood out in my mind since he said it. And he talked about, this is, quote, the pushiest I've been with myself, end quote. And I loved that. It made me think about, sometimes we're so tough on ourselves about like, do this or do that. But like, we have to treat ourselves like we would treat another human, right? Like we can't bully someone into like doing something. And so why should we do that with ourselves? I don't know if you remember that. It was just a really interesting part that resonated with me. And I enjoyed it.
No, I think I kind of remember that. I'm not going to lie. During those, I will say about the show, sometimes the challenges they did, I would tune them out a little bit just because to me, that was like the silliest part of it.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite part is when they would have trauma chats, basically, is what they
trauma
were.
dumps.
I was like, oh, yeah, here, now I'm tuned in. But no, he just overall is just seems like a really likable guy and a good friend. I feel like just seeing him on the show, I feel like people would say that about him. But yeah, I really enjoyed watching him.
Yeah, me too. And so let's go. I have like their superlatives. I feel like I should have started this with Chet, but like, so the superlatives, they all voted on like, and by the way, superlative for people who don't know is like in your yearbook, most likely to That's like a superlative in a yearbook. And so Johnny was voted most likely to clean a mess.
True.
Which I was like, yes, that's right. And Chet was voted most unpredictable, but in a good, like I understood what they were trying to say. Yeah. He took it as such, but just like exactly what we said. You wouldn't expect him to be great. So that was that.
Yep.
Okay. Now let's move on to Kim Zolciak-Biermann, who is still Kim Zolciak-Biermann. After all of this and all the stuff we've heard about the divorce, she was seen on TMZ like last week talking about still, it's like the same old shit. Croy's not working. He's not making money. And it's like, girl, get yourself together. Because so for me, what I noticed here, and I rarely will comment on anyone's appearance, but Kim looked gaunt and unwell. She looked ill.
She really did. Yeah. No, she really did. And just, I mean, truly her just whole experience on the Surreal Life is yelling on the phone to her still husband, but in the process of divorcing. Literally, that is all she did. I don't really know. Obviously, I know she went for a paycheck, but as far as like, I don't know. I think actually everyone else got something out of the show, which sounds so silly, but just the way that the other people opened up and talked. Whereas like Kim, we really didn't it was just the same shit with Kim. Really.
Well, right, because she doesn't know how to be a participant in her own healing, and she wants to blame Croy, and she wanted to blame Nene, and she wanted to blame Housewives, and she wanted to blame production, and she wanted to blame Shed Media. You get my point, right?
Yeah.
Kim is a blamer. She's a victim and she's a blamer, and she is unwilling to look at the role she plays in her own demise. And what I found was so interesting is that Kim, I agree, she was totally like, what she said she got from this experience was safety. So basically, she got to get out of the house for 2 weeks. She got a paycheck and she got to be somewhere, quote unquote, safe. But she was yelling at Croy on the phone the whole time. So I was just
on the phone with them.
Yeah, it was not. I mean, it was just ridiculous. So Kim, her superlative was most likely to talk shit, which I think is hilarious. The weirdest thing that happened. Well, two things. So they went to go get tattoos, and Kim decided to get the same tattoo as Josie, to get a matching tattoo. And Josie was like, this is weird, right? And Kim is just like so about it. And I'm sitting at home like, that is bizarre.
I know. I don't know. So I don't know how Kim's mind works. And maybe I'm just going off the rails here. But was she wanting to do that to like get under Josie's skin because she saw that Josie and Chet were kind of flirting a little bit? You know what I mean? I don't know if that's her vibe, but that was so weird.
It was super weird. And I think you're exactly right that that's her exact vibe. So to clue people in, Kim and Chet, there's only one place in the whole house that doesn't have cameras, which is the bathroom. And apparently Kim and Johnny shared a room and they had the biggest bathroom, which of course, Kim Zolciak-Biermann is going to take the room with the biggest bathroom because she needs the most stuff. And I'm like, okay, entitlement. But you know, that's how Kim is. Initially, I don't know if they slept together, if they didn't sleep together. They went into the bathroom. They were there for a long time. Johnny, the roommate, was upset because they were keeping him awake, which means that they weren't quiet. And then, you know, this whole big thing came out in the news about, well, Croy felt like she cheated. And she's like, no, I didn't cheat. But then here's the insane thing, to your point, is that, so then we see this shift. Chet knows that like Kim, her life is a disaster. So like she's a fun distraction, but he's never going to want to be with her. So then he starts flirting with Josie. And then Kim, I don't know if you caught this, but my little eagle observational eye caught when Chet and Josie were talking about how it was like their final meeting. And he said, this experience has been everything to me. He tells Josie, your spirit is more beautiful than your appearance. And they cut to Kim and she was rolling her eyes. You caught that?
I did too. Yep.
And she does this thing. She has this nervous tick where she chews on her fake nail, which also like is disgusting because there are germs under those nails. I mean, listen, not to offend anyone listening to this, but like, that's not a good thing to chew.
No.
Unless you want to get the plague.
Right. Definitely not.
So it's like, Kim, so you're married. You have 6 children. You had some moment in the bathroom with him and now you think you own him and you're rolling your eye. Like it just shows that she is in such a bad space. Her head is clearly up her own butt because like, think about your kids. Who cares about Chet Hanks? Think about like...
But then did you see that recently an TMZ article came out that Chet was like, he just had dinner with Kim and he was like, yeah, I'd move to Atlanta to date her. I was like, Chet, you better not. What are you doing?
Yeah, why? What, you're going to be a stepdad to 6 kids? And here's the thing, Chet is great, but like he admitted, he's like, I'm not a good boyfriend. He doesn't know how to be monogamous.
He said that, yeah.
So when someone tells you that, listen, I'm sure he's a good person, but you probably wouldn't want him as a boyfriend until he matures a little bit. But
right.
So yeah, that with Kim was really odd to me because it's like, well, which one is it? You're telling Croy nothing has happened, but now you're rolling your eyes, and I don't know, it just doesn't make sense. So
no, it doesn't. She definitely wanted Croy to think something happened, and I'm not. I'm still kind of up in the air whether I think anything happen with them. Maybe something happened with them in the bathroom. I don't think it went as far as what happened between him and Josie, which we'll get into. But
yeah,
I think she wanted people to think. I think she wants people to think that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think also because her whole thing on Surreal Life was to poke the bear, which was Croy, knowing that he would see this, knowing that it would upset him. And so again, I think those are personality characteristics about Kim that I don't appreciate at all, because it's like, you have children who are suffering. Just stop it. Just stop it already. But she doesn't know how. And if she's not gambling, she's addicted to her phone. I mean,
for sure.
Did you ever see one scene with her without her phone? I don't know that I ever saw one scene.
No, like I said, she would not have done the show if they weren't allowed to have their phone, for sure.
Amen. All right, so let's move on to Allie Brooke, because Allie, we didn't really talk about her much last time because there wasn't really much to talk about. But now we got to see a whole look into her trauma history. So she was a singer with Fifth Harmony, who was a girl group. And you had mentioned last time we did the podcast that she talked about some sexually inappropriate, predatory stuff that went on with her, with record execs and things like that. And she told some scary stories. And so what's so interesting to me about Allie is that you can tell she was told you have to be perfect. And if you're not perfect, like you're not going to be able to continue with this or whatever. And so she has internalized that. And the one interesting thing, so she talks about anxiety. She talks about having anxiety. But the one interesting thing that she talked about that I have some information on is she talked about having issues with sounds. Particularly, I think it was like the last episode or something. She says she is scared of balloon popping.
Yes.
And it hurts her ears. And then she's like scared of loud noises. And she literally goes, like, when there was balloons and people doing something, she like went up to the top of the stairs and plugged her ears, which tells me that it really is a significant concern for her. So what I just wanted to mention is that this is actually really common. This is actually something that I struggle with, but there's a couple different things we're talking about here. Okay. So, Allie is, oh God, she's such a sweet, sensitive soul. But so the fear of loud noises is called phonophobia or sonophobia. It's an irrational and persistent fear of sounds, especially loud or sudden ones, that can cause people to experience anxiety, panic, or fear. So it can have genetic factors. It can be rooted in anxiety. It can be a history of an overly fight or flight nervous system that's had a lot of trauma for a lot of years. Just uncomplicated PTSD. So there's a lot of reasons for it. But phonophobia or sonophobia is different from something called misophonia. Misophonia is a disorder where you have a decreased tolerance to specific sounds and things you can sense related to them. So it doesn't have an official recognition as a distinct disorder, but experts do still recognize it as such. And now there is a formal consensus for research purposes for diagnosing and treating it. And so misophonia, what I will say about that is that research shows that people with misophonia, which I have misophonia. So for example, like I will hear a motorcycle and it will startle my nervous system to the point where I feel rage, like I want to punch someone. And that's not the kind of person I am. Right. And it's every time. It gets me every time. And if I don't cover my ears, it's terrible. So research shows that people with misophonia are more likely to have certain differences in their brain structure and activity. And one of those differences is having more connections and activity in between certain areas of your brain. So I like to say that I'm like this because I'm smart.
There you go.
And then the last thing I'll say is that, so sudden intense noises can like trigger or mistakenly send people into fight or flight mode. So for people who already have like a complex post-traumatic stress disorder, that can, listen, I'm not trying to teach a class. I just thought it was so fascinating, right, that she did bring that up because you don't hear about that a lot.
No, you don't. It reminds me, I don't know. Do you know who Jeanette McCarty is? She wrote
The
that
name
book.
sounds familiar.
She wrote that
yes.
book.
I am glad my mom died.
There's a video of her on TikTok that she was celebrating her book, and she did a thing that you like pop and it's like confetti, and she did that. And as soon as she did it, she covered her ears and screamed in agony. And it was like, so like you talking about that just reminds me, you know what I mean, of like kind of what you're talking about, because it's almost like something in that, like the sound. I don't know if she wasn't, it wasn't like, there's a difference between like what you're saying if like someone's startled by a noise, whereas this was like a full emotional reaction to it. So I feel like it's something that's not like really talked about a lot, but it's definitely a thing.
Well, that's why we're here, right? To talk about stuff that's not talked about. And here's the thing. It can be common with people who are neurodivergent, but it's also common in people who are not neurodivergent. People think this is just an autism spectrum disorder. And it's like, nope, this is more than that. There's a lot more research on it. So if you experience that, you are not alone. Therapy, basically. Therapy and medication is a good treatment for that. But if you're looking more into specific help for that, I would look to Psychology Today has a therapist finder, and they have ways that you can search for certain things. So if you're having certain issues that you really want to look at treatment for that, you can search for that. But so what were your other thoughts about Allie? She just seems like such a sweet pea.
No, she seems like a sweet pea. I feel like we just got like kind of a taste of her. I wish I would have gotten to see more of her. But like I said last episode, the really thing that stuck out with me with her is the music industry is very dark. As we're recording this, Diddy was arrested. And
hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.
Literally. And just a reminder for people, I know I'm someone who wants to be in the known about that, but also give yourself some time and space if you need to, because what he's being arrested for can be very triggering, and it's horrific that the music industry, it's super dark. And Allie being in Fifth Harmony, like you were talking, a girl group, the way that they are taught to be robots and you do what you're told, you have to look a certain way, you have to sound a certain way, you have to say yes ma'am, no sir. You can see that with her. She is so sweet, but she's also very quiet. And I sometimes think she's afraid to be a little silly.
I think she's afraid to have a personality.
I think she is too, because she's been told you can't have a personality.
Right. She was told you have to fit in this box. And something I wrote down that is so interesting to me is she literally, so like it was a joke about how she says yes to everything. Like that's her thing. Like, yes. Yeah. And I wrote down, she literally says yes to everything, which is not lost on me in terms of how trauma can lead to people pleasing and saying literally yes to everything. Because I don't think she's looking at it as that deep, but the fact that she says yes to everything to me is something that she should really look at and work on.
Well, yeah. And so usually with the girl group, so when you look at the Pussycat Dolls or Fifth Harmony, there's always, while it's a girl group, there's usually one in the girl group, maybe two that are the stars of the group. So everyone else is very much told, again, the no personality, right? You do what you're told, you're in the back, you sing back up and things like that. And so, yeah, I think she struggles to really just to be herself because she's been told, I think, to bury that a little bit. So I don't know. I'm glad we got to see her because, again, that music industry, she'd be dark.
Dark, dark, dark. And thank you for saying that about the Diddy stuff. And you're always have such good words of wisdom with that because, for survivors, it's like, it's so hard. It's on the one hand, it's amazing to watch, but on the other hand, it's so disgusting how men in Hollywood just continue and the music industry just continue to get away with all this. And so my hope is that victims will get their time in court to, be seen and be heard and be validated. And I send love to anyone who is, dealing with any of that in any way, shape, or form. Also, Allie was voted most likely to kill someone because she's so she's so sweet. I was like, oh my God, that's
so funny.
Hilarious. Okay, so let's go next to Josie Canseco, because she was another person who was super guarded until the end. And then when her dad came to visit, you saw why. So my impression is that she tells her story that her dad is Jose Canseco and her mom is like a model. Mm-hmm. And they both had drug and alcohol and mental health struggles when she was young. And so a lot of her upbringing, she was completely neglected.
Yeah.
Which does a lot to a growing developmentally changing brain. Neglect, like research shows that is a really hard thing to come back from. And so she was telling her story. And one thing I appreciated the most about her is like, because her parents are public figures, she's like, it's hard for me to tell my story because it's their story too. And I was like, dang, she just hit the nail on the head in terms of, and you don't have to be famous. It's hard to tell your story when you have other family members that you're telling it on.
Yeah. And it's this awkward thing because you don't, I could tell it's not like she wanted to shit on her parents by any means, but obviously her experience, I mean, the way she told it is, you know, it felt like they had a daughter, but they weren't really meant to be parent. You know what I mean? Meant to be parents in that moment. Like it was really sad to listen to it. And then, but then obviously earlier we talk about, you know, we hear Jose Canseco talk about when he was at his lowest and how his daughter, you know, really saved his life in that moment. So obviously it sounds like he wanted to have a connection, but then as, you know, she got older and what he was experiencing and what the mom was experiencing, I don't know. It was just sad to hear. And you could tell she was trying to be she wanted to be open, but she also was being mindful of that. It wasn't just, there are other people involved in her story.
Right. And I think that's the hardest part for a lot of survivors telling stories. It's like, you have to, secrets keep us sick. You can't, you know, keep secrets, but at the same time, I understand where she was coming from. And, you know, I found it so interesting that because of the way she was raised and, you know, neglected and not emotionally supported, you can tell because she's hyper independent. She was the youngest one, I think, in that house, and she seemed to be one of the most mature, responsible people, which tells me that she didn't have the luxury to be a child. And so, unfortunately, I know what unresolved trauma does and how if she doesn't work on that, it's going to be hard for her, you know? And what I think is most interesting, you alluded to this earlier, is that Josie and Chet initially just like didn't understand each other because she was guarded and like she got vibes from Chet, like he would not be a good boyfriend or whatever. And it wasn't until he shared his story about his suicidal event and she realized that her dad had the same story, and then she became attracted to him. And then what happened was, so we see late night Josie and Chet going into same said bathroom that he went in with Kim for 4 hours, I think it was.
Yeah, I think it was something like
that. And then they came out, and you could tell afterwards that they, like, you could just tell with the body language that there was like an intimacy there. And so what happened was, and listen, I'm not judging her. Good for you. Go girl. Do your thing. But when Josie is talking to Johnny Weir at the table, she doesn't want to say on the mic what happened. And he says, just type it out on your phone. And he said, type it in your notes. And he said, was it good? And she said, yeah. So,
they definitely hooked up in some
yeah. You know, and no shaming here for either of them. They're young kids, you know, mazel, whatever.
No, but the timing of it is definitely something you might want to do some reflection on that, girl. Do your thing, but there might be some daddy issues going on.
Yes, honey. I was like, I could psychoanalyze this for 14 hours. I could psychoanalyze this choice So now you choose. It's so interesting. But to me, it's just it just shows how we repeat unconscious patterns until we know better to do better and to do different. And so to me, that was one giant trauma playing out in picking a partner that certainly cannot meet her needs. But, and then at the end, it said that they just like never talked again. And now she's Instagram official with some other guy. And like, great. I hope you are happy. But
I used to be a Selling Sunset girly, but I have not watched in a while. But apparently for people who watch Selling Sunset, so Josie is now dating. His name is Johnny Manziel. He is a football player, I believe, but he was formerly married to Bree, who is on Selling Sunset. So I know I was like, who is she dating? Because why? For a second, I was like, oh, maybe they'll get together. How cute would that be? And then it says she had a boyfriend. I was like, oh, well, that lasted 5 seconds.
4 seconds, literally.
So then I looked into it. I was like, oh, I wonder who she's dating. Apparently that's who she's dating. So,
thanks for boots on the ground, girl. Thank you.
Got to get those details. And then apparently Chet's still out here trying to date Kim. I don't know.
Josie's, her superlative was most likely to win a game called Salad Bowl, which I'm still not sure what the game is, but it looked super cute.
And was it kind of like Pictionary a little bit? I was confused as far as...
Yeah, it seemed like that. I'm like, kids today, they come up with the funnest names for stuff that doesn't need a rebranded name. I'm like, that just looks like Pictionary, but okay.
Literally, I think it was just Pictionary.
Okay. Okay, so let's go to Macy Grey. So Macy, here's the funny thing about Macy. She is so kooky in the best of ways. She is silly. She is kooky. But she spent so much of the trip sick from side effects from Ozempic. She had to go to the hospital for that. And then so the thing that was so shocking to me is that their last day there, they're going to get her for like an event or something. And she is having her first bowel movement of the trip. And y'all, 2 weeks. Yes, 2 weeks. That woman did not have a bowel movement. And I'm like, how did she even survive? How did you even eat and live and survive? I don't understand.
I know she went to the hospital that one time during the show because of pain. But for 2 weeks, girl, my gosh, how are you not dead?
Seriously. And it's like, it sucks because I know she, when we talked about this before, she went on Ozempic because she, quote, didn't want to look fat on TV, which, you talked about giving her grace for because she's honest about it, but it did bum me out. And it's like, I feel like we didn't get to see her full spirit because she wasn't feeling well. And so I guess, to me, it's like I have the ability to look at this and think to myself, like, if she could have just loved herself and said, this is who I am and whatever, then maybe we would have gotten to see a little bit more of that. But I mean, either way, she seems like an absolute lovely person.
Oh, she is a hoot. I want her more on reality TV because what's also funny about her, and we touched this a little bit on our previous episode, the show was a lot about being in your feels and opening up about things. Macy Grey does not want to do that. And
no, she was having none of it.
She wasn't. I was doing a little diving into her story because I was like, there's something here, especially there's an episode where her daughter comes and visits.
Yes.
And she was adamant about her daughter not drinking. And I was like, okay, like, what is that? So I looked into the daughter. I was like, maybe the daughter has had, issues with alcohol. Is there any, DUIs that are out there? And nothing about the daughter. But what's interesting is just this year in February, the daughter got a restraining order against her brother, so Macy's son. And it was because she was saying that the son was attacking Macy physically and also like mentally this is all allegedly like abusive to Macy. So I was like, okay, so there's a deep family component that's going on here. Now, Macy denied everything. She said, no, my son treats me just fine. Everything's peachy and everything's great. So I was like, which we see that with Macy, right? She's very, when other people tell their story, she's like, can we wrap it up? Or she doesn't really want to tell a lot about her story. So I do think she's very guarded, and you're looking at someone else who is in the music industry. So I think she's had to be very guarded. And I think there's a lot more to her that I wish we could have seen, but if she's not ready to open up about things, she doesn't have to.
Right.
But she was definitely, she was a fun watch. I will say that. You could just tell she was not into everyone opening up as, you know what I mean, as much as they did.
Yeah. I mean, listen, for someone who's not a therapist, I swear you could be. I mean, I know you have dabbled and, have education, stuff like that. But what I'm saying is that is such an astute observation that I couldn't agree more, is that her guardedness was I read secrecy from it.
Yeah.
I read secrecy. And when her daughter came, and so for folks who didn't watch, what Lyndsay is talking about is her daughter. Everyone had a family member or like a friend come for like a family day. And Macy's daughter came and she was getting secretly bombed. And here's the thing. It's like, I'm not sure exactly how old Macy's daughter is. I don't know if I don't remember that.
Yeah.
But Macy had such a energy around her daughter. Like, she made a couple comments about how my daughter likes to drink a little too much or this or that. And I, as someone who's worked in family systems before, saw there is something up in this family system. Either Macy is over-momming and overreacting, or she's not at all overreacting and this is behavior she's used to. And she doesn't want to have to explain why her child is blackout drunk. And her child seemed quiet, but that could also be due to alcohol intake. And so I agree with you that the whole time Macy really, I joke, it seemed like she was allergic to emotions, but I could just tell, as a therapist, you get the sense of things. Sometimes people come in and they're like asking for help, but you could tell they're not quite ready. And I just got the feeling that Macy just doesn't want people to see some of the darker parts that we all have, right? Like you and I, we'll just share it. We'll throw it out there. She's not comfortable doing that. But to your point, she's very private. She's not an extroverted social butterfly. She's a private, kind of more introverted person. And that might just be her preference. But again, I agree with you. I would have loved to see more, because she's just she's amazing. She's creative. She's so funny. And her superlative was best to laugh. And I was like, 1,000%. She has the greatest giggle.
She does. When you hear her laugh, you have to laugh as well. And I going into this, I couldn't really have told you. I never thought about what Macy Gray's personality was. And so just seeing this, she's silly. She's funny. I say this all the time. She's a hoot, but very guarded. Very much, my business is my business, which fair. But it's just interesting because, we saw everyone else really open up and talk about things. Whereas when that was like, even at the end, when Chet was talking about, all his stuff, Macy kind of patted him on the back and was like, you did good. You talk a little much, but you did good. It's like, you have to laugh at it. Because she's not being mean.
She's just intolerant to other people's emotions. Literally. She is literally lactose intolerant for feeling. She's feeling intolerant. Okay. There needs to be a new medication on the market for Macy Gray's intolerance to feelings. And because you could just tell it makes her itchy, it makes her uncomfortable. And initially too, Tyler Posey, who I think we talked a lot about, well, maybe last time, but either way, Tyler was always someone who was so spiritual, so open. He's sober. You could tell he's like working his butt off. He's so open. He's so, shares his experience, strength, and hope. And you can tell that she loved him, but she just couldn't, she made some sort of comment like, I don't necessarily love that part of him, but he's a good person. and I enjoy him.
Yeah.
And so, you know, my message to Tyler, if he was watching that, would be, it's not about you. It has nothing to do with you. You represent something for her that is very uncomfortable, which is just freely sharing and not keeping secrets and all that. Macy's not there. So to her, it does feel intolerable.
No, and look, I'm someone now where I share all my thoughts, I share all my feelings. But I had to get there. And I know and I kind of wonder if Macy had this, if she has the same thoughts. And I'm sure other people do. Maybe she doesn't, but I know for me, I was, even for someone who went to school for social work and went to school to be a therapist, I myself was afraid to open up about like my stuff, because I thought once I did, like, honestly, like the feelings would never end, basically, or like the tears would never stop, or like if you open those gates up, what the hell is that going to mean?
What is behind them? Yeah.
Yeah. And so I have to wonder, you know, with Macy, just doing a little deep dive into her family, you know, I have to think there's a lot more going on. And so I think it's very easy just to be guarded and just say, you know what, my business is my business and I don't want to think about it. I don't want to address it. And so I get that. And it is really scary, and everyone's on their own journey. Maybe she'll get there, maybe she won't. And that's that's okay, as long as, like, when it gets not okay is when it's honest, you know, affecting your life functioning, obviously. But right now, I think it said after like her thing at the end of the episode, she just released a new song, and I think she was going to go back on tour. So yeah, I don't know. She's an interesting.
Very extremely. Like, you can tell there's a lot in there that as a therapist, I would just love to pull it out. I just love, would love to pull that right out.
Yeah.
But there's a saying, and I heard this and I repeat it, is that, I almost died in silence. So now I heal loudly, because.
Ooh, I like that. Oh, that's a good saying.
From me to you, my friend.
Oh,
and
thank
so
you.
I think we're both people who tried it that way, and this way is easier. And however afraid you are of like what emotions are going to come or what's behind that gate when you open it, it's always better to unpack it than it is. Avoiding everything makes it seem like a big monster in a closet. That's what avoidance does. And so for Macy, it's like I wanted to help her, but I could tell that happens to me. Like I usually get this desperate feeling I want to help people who aren't ready to help themselves.
Yeah.
Like, that's a thing for me. And I'm like, we got to let her have this, and hopefully she is happy and all of that. But I just think, like, life is too short to hide how we feel and keep secrets and keep it all in. It's just, ugh.
It is. And we don't know what her growing up, she could have been one, because I was in a similar situation. Like, I was very much, emotions were bad in my house, right? Crying was weakness. And, you learn to just then bury those emotions or go off and cry in a corner. So, who knows? Obviously, I think there's more to Macy's story. I wish we would have gotten to see a little bit more of that. But her time on the show, again, I would love to see her back on reality
1,000%.
TV.
In fact, I would love if they would do this group again. I think that would be fascinating to see, because they, when they went to Medellin, they did like a mural of everybody.
Oh,
so there's like a mural of everyone. And it was so funny. Like, some of them were like joking about Johnny Weir goes, I look like a Pee-wee something about Pee-wee
geriatric Pee-wee Herman. Yep. I wrote down that. I was like, oh my gosh, that's so funny.
It was like, he kind of does.
Oh, Tyler said he looked like a sloth, and he did.
Oh, a sloth, and he definitely did. But do you know what's funny about Tyler? So speaking of Tyler, his head is always so cocked to the side like this.
Oh, it is. Huh.
And here's the thing. So for those of you listening to this, I'm like touching my head to my ear. And every time you look at Taylor, he's like super, like, has his head super cocked. And I'm like, I don't know if that's just like, is that his anatomy? Is that just how he feels comfortable. I'm not sure. It was just an interesting note that I observed.
No, is it just, so he's always looking
He's
like
always
he's thinking something or listening? Yeah, I don't know. He does do that though. That's
even when he's talking to other people, it's just so interesting. I would just love to know what that's about. But so he also, Tyler is also in recovery. And he is someone who I feel like is a good example of what happens when you just let it go and heal, like truly.
Yeah.
And he is just like an amazing human person. I adore Tyler.
He meditates. He opens feelings and thoughts with open arms. He's like chasing Macy around with his thoughts and feelings. Yeah. And Macy's like, no.
She's like, please get it away.
You know what Macy would hate if you, I used to love doing I feel statements with my kiddos.
Oh, yeah.
And they hated it because first of all, when you try to do that with someone, they want to say thoughts. I feel that you, and you go, no, that's not. And Macy would hate that. If you're, oh my gosh, she would run away from that. But Tyler, he is just, and I said this in the last episode, talk about someone who was his fame, the height of his fame was really during the nastiness of the media. Right. And the media really tried to out him out as a person, which we dived into that in the previous episode we did. And so just hearing him talk about that, and just, he was someone that he's really known for Teen Wolf, which was an MTV show. I never really watched that show, but I always just liked him as a person. And just seeing more of him on this show, you can tell that he's done the damn work.
Oh,
and
yes.
I love that. I love that he was on this. Yes, respect.
I agree. Because when you do the damn work, and it's so hard, as you know, as we both know, it's like you see that in other people and you respect it. It's not that I don't respect Macy, but to me, I respect more when people are willing to dig in and do the hard stuff than to just say, you know what, forget it, I'm not interested. To me, that takes more strength, but I also understand the limitations, right? Tyler was voted most likely to cheer someone up, which I'm just like, yeah, he was like the house therapist that I was like. He
was. Allie one time had a panic attack, and he helped her out. But he wasn't preachy about it.
That's exactly what I was thinking. He wasn't on a high horse. He wasn't preachy. He wasn't like whereas Kim, she would just talk and talk and talk about how ice baths are so great while refusing to do it, right? That's so Kim. And he is like, okay, I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to be my authentic self. And it just hit absolutely like chef's kiss.
He seems like the type, which I'm sure I know sometimes me as a friend, in like my background, I have to ask my friends, like, okay, do you want me, is this for me just to listen to, or do you want advice? I feel like Tyler's the same way. Like in that moment when Allie was having a panic attack, she needed someone to like go through things to actually help her calm down. And I feel like he's just that type of friend where he'll listen if you need to, or if you need advice, he'll be there for you. Yeah.
Like, do you need solutions or do you need to vent?
Yeah,
you know, that sort of thing. But here's what's interesting, and I'm glad you brought this up because I almost forgot about this. When Allie was having a panic attack and Tyler was helping her, what he was doing was actually the exact appropriate thing, which is grounding. So he had Allie do something. And for those of you watching who maybe like you have a background in this, so you're familiar. For those who aren't, grounding is an exercise that helps for a myriad of things, but specifically panic attacks, dissociative episodes where you're not feeling in your body and you're feeling disconnected. And essentially you look at the five senses. What do I feel? What do I see? What do I smell? What do I taste? What do I touch? And it helped. So and I was like, I don't know if he knew enough to just know to do that, or whatever, if it was a happy accident or if it was purposeful, but that's exactly what to do when you're having a panic attack. Yeah. So for people who are listening to this, who suffer with panic attacks, one thing that you can do is you look around your space. First of all, breath work with panic is paramount because when we panic, we lose our breath. And I'm guilty of this too. I do the super shallow breathing and that's not helpful. So deep breathing. Yep. And I have it's called the 4-7-8 breathing trick. So you breathe in for a count of 4, you hold it for 7, and then you breathe it out super slow for a count of 8. And if you've never done this before and you try it, you're going to be like, this is impossible. You're just not used to it. Right. And it helps people to fall asleep. It helps with anxiety. So breathing and then grounding are beautiful solutions when you're in those weeds. And I just love that he showed that.
I know. And he actually did it with her. And yeah, that was one of my, when I worked with kiddos, that was a great one to do. And I've had to use it myself.
Oh my God. I use it myself literally every night. I'm not joking. Yeah. And when I would have someone in session who was actively either having a panic attack or in a dissociative episode, that was my go-to intervention to help them come back safely and come to a place where then other interventions could happen. Yeah. So, and I just love that these things were featured on the show. It was so focused on mental health and wellness. I was like,
I know.
I love it.
I do too.
The last one we have to talk about is OT Genasis, who we did talk about last episode, but again, he's a rapper and he's the baby daddy of Malika, who is friends with the Kardashians. So people know her from that. He is a rapper who grew up in really dangerous, like he talked about like having a gun held to his head from someone else and then like it clicked because it jammed. And I'm like people have no understanding of how that can destroy your entire psyche, because I think we talked about this last time. There's something called the hierarchy of needs, Maslow's pyramid of needs. And literally on the bottom is safety. So if you are not safe, for example, if you're not safe from violence, if you're not being fed, if you're not being housed, if those basic needs aren't being met, it is nearly impossible to evolve or do anything because you're literally living in fight or flight. My concern about OT is his drinking. I feel so his whole shtick the whole time was he called himself Tequila Papi. And I could tell from doing the work I've done in addiction long enough that he drinks to a point where he's gone, like he has left the building. And I believe that that's a trauma response because you can't live in that sort of pain or fear all the time. And so he is the perfect example of a sensitive soul who was raised in very damaging situations that set him up for a lot of stuff. And I just hope that he is able to see through this experience that being vulnerable can be safe and beautiful when appropriate. And he deserves softness and vulnerability. Not to sound like Carl, but, he deserves it.
He does. And we hinted at this earlier, but what's confusing is at the end, he started to choke up and he started crying. He talked about how in the Surreal Life house, he doesn't have to worry about being stabbed or shot. And I was like, oh my God. So is he still experiencing this, or does he still have those thoughts when he's at home? You know what I mean? Like, what?
That's a good point. Like, is it trauma that he's flashing back to, or are you still in that scenario? I'm not kidding. I've almost reached out to every single member of this cast. And then I was like, Melissa, please stop. You have enough on your plate. Just stop it. Because I just want to be like, OT, please. Yeah. I just want to help you. And I just want to like, whatever. So my hope for him is that he is safe, that he understands that vulnerability can be a good thing. And I just hope that he does look at how he uses alcohol, because my worry is that at some point it stops being fun. And it's you stop becoming Tequila Papi and you start becoming something scarier, So that was just kind of my 2 cents on that.
No, I think you bring up a good point. And with the amount of trauma that he's been to, And you see a lot of time people turn to substances to cope with that because a lot of times it tunes out that noise. And so I have to wonder, who, that might be something that he's going through. But yeah, my biggest thing with him is I send positivity and safetyness for him because just hearing his story, so just scary. Talk about true violence is just what he grew up with. And even as an adult, and just him describing the neighborhood that he was living in and the culture, just truly, all I want is safetyness for that man. Cause he literally is like a teddy bear.
Oh, God. I mean, Earth Angel, sincerely.
Yes.
Like, who knew that OT Genesis would be like one of my favorite? He's just like a good person. And you look at someone like him and you think, my gosh, if he was given different opportunities to grow up in safer areas, to grow up with, not in poverty, not experiencing these trauma cycles, but listen, kudos. He's made amazing things of himself, right? He has an amazing career. And, his superlative, by the way, was life of the party, which, hope that doesn't come back to bite him. But I agree. I wish him and everybody else nothing but love, light, and peace and happiness. And, I'm sad it's over. I'm sad.
Yes, I really enjoyed this season. It was only 8 episodes. And I think this cast, I remember when this show was announced, I was thinking that is such a variety of cast members.
Yeah, I was like, that's so random.
How did they pick this group? And I remember being like, I don't know if I'm going to watch this, maybe. And then after I watched the first episode, which for the people who are maybe curious about the show, I will say the first episode is free on YouTube. So if you want to check it out, you can do that. But yeah, I don't know. I thought this was a good season. Maybe me and you liked it so much because there was this huge mental health aspect of that.
I think so. I think so. I'm like, that must be it. No one else cares except for us.
Right? But I feel like people are communicating that they want to see more of that on these Bravo shows, right? Because I feel like so much with reality stars, they feel like they have to hold a lot in or can't bring up certain things, where in like the Surreal Life, like that's what you're there for. I mean, can you imagine? Oh God, it might be annoying, but like Tom Sandoval on the Surreal Life, because he's one that I kind of want to crack a little bit into his childhood. We did a little bit on that Dr. Drew episode, but there's more to it.
I did a whole episode on how that was
I remember.
Nonsense.
Oh, I know. No, Dr. Drew, pish posh on him, but there is something when it comes to Sandoval and his childhood that I would just love just to like understand a little bit of it. Sure. But he's also one, he would just probably say a lot of bullshit on Surreal Life. So it's hard for him. But if he actually would be like open and honest about things, that would be interesting. So like,
I don't think he knows how to do that, but that's just me. Well, thank you so much for being here and recapping this. Thank you all so much for listening. You'll definitely be back. We don't have Surreal Life to cover, but you'll be back covering something. But please share with everybody where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can find me on my Instagram, Vanderpod Recaps, and
super helpful. So helpful.
Oh, thank you. And
no, literally, like I would die without your account. It's so like you're just like, okay, this is the information we need because I don't have time to listen to this, and you write it. It's like amazing.
Well, I appreciate that because my Vanderpump is in a really weird space, so I've been trying to like do other things with my page. I think I know you've talked about this, but finally, I think Instagram likes me again. My page was going through it. So I literally now censor everything on my stories because I don't know. Instagram, we need to have a chat, but
we do. I just said that I feel like I'm in an unhealthy relationship with Meta and I want out.
Yes, that's how I feel as well. The other day it got mad at me because I don't remember why I was talking about this, but there was a reason. But I put the word boob in my stories and I got an alert that was like, are you sure you want to put this? Because other accounts have done this and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, so then I censored out the word boob and it was fine. So I was like, okay.
And here's the thing, Lyndsay, when you look at some of the rotten garbage that people talk about on Instagram, like the things that they'll say, and I'm like, so that's fine. That's fine.
Literally.
But me advocating for human rights is not fine? Okay, great. Just want to make sure. Right. Yeah. Got it.
Their rules do not make sense, but right now I think we're friends. I don't know. Now that I put this out in the universe, probably not going to be. But my page has just been in a weird place. So I've been trying to figure out what to do with it. And so I've been having fun just, while Vanderpump is kind of up in the air, we still have the Valley, which that's going to be that if I come on, I would love to talk when the Valley premieres. That will be
boom
something
that we'll do that. Yeah,
to explore.
Absolutely.
But yeah, you can find my page Vanderpod Recaps, and then was this episode come out next week?
Yes, next Tuesday.
Okay, so I can't announce it yet on here, but I'm pretty sure next week. Stay tuned to my page because we'll have a very big and fun announcement over there.
Ooh, tune in for I love a tease, honey. I love it.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you. Please, everyone, go follow Vanderpod Recaps. Can't wait to hear the announcement. Even though I know what it is, but I'm super excited for everyone to hear it. And I'm excited. I'm just excited. And I'm excited for you to come back. And I can't wait for the Valley. I swear we could do so many episodes on that. It'll be wild. But
yes,
for today, thank you, Lyndsay. Thank you to everyone for listening. And please remember to take care of yourselves and each other. And ta-ta for now.
Bye.
Disclaimer. Posts are not intended to diagnose, treat, or provide medical advice. Yourbishtherapist is for entertainment and informational purposes only. The podcast, my opinions, and posts are my own and not associated with past or present employers, any organizations, Bravo TV, Greyheart Productions, or any other television network. The information in YBT podcast and on its social media is provided for general informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat. Please do not act or refrain from acting based on anything you read, see, or hear on YBT podcast or associated social media. Communicating with YBT via email and or social media does not form a therapeutic alliance. Melissa, operator of YBT, is unable to provide any therapeutic advice, treatment, or feedback.